My name is Samantha Turner, and at 29, I own a multi-million-dollar marketing company. 11 years ago, my mother called me a disgrace, slapped me across the face, and kicked me out of our home because I refused to marry the man she had chosen for me. Today, I return to my hometown on my private jet with my 5-year-old daughter, Emma. The expression on my parents' faces when they saw us step out of the car was worth every struggle I endured. Before I continue my story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you want more real-life comeback stories. Growing up in the Turner household meant living by strict rules and even stricter expectations. My parents, Margaret and Robert Turner, weren't just conservative. They were controlling in ways that shaped every aspect of my existence. Our suburban home in Pennsylvania looked picture-perfect from the outside. Manicured lawn, pristine white fence, and windows that gleamed in the sunlight. Inside those walls, however, was a different story. My mother, Margaret, ruled our home with an iron fist disguised in designer gloves. Standing at 5'6", with perfectly coiffed auburn hair that never moved an inch, she was obsessed with appearances and social standing. Every decision she made revolved around how others would perceive our family. My father, Robert, a tall, quiet man who worked as an accountant at a respected firm, rarely challenged her. He nodded along to her demands, occasionally throwing me apologetic glances when her criticism became particularly harsh. "A proper young lady doesn't question her mother's wisdom," became her mantra whenever I showed the slightest hint of independence. By the time I turned 15, these confrontations had become a regular occurrence. My crime: wanting to join the debate team instead of cotillion classes. Applying for a part-time job at the local bookstore instead of volunteering at my mother's country club charity events. Wearing jeans instead of the floral dresses she laid out for me. "You're embarrassing the family with these rebellious phases," she would say, her voice razor-sharp while maintaining a perfect smile. "The Johnsons' daughter never gives them this much trouble." Our dining room became a battlefield, with daily lectures about my posture, my grades, which were excellent but never excellent enough, and how I would never attract a quality husband with my attitude. My father would stare at his plate during these moments, occasionally muttering, "Listen to your mother, Samantha." His cowardice hurt more than her direct attacks. The subject of my future husband became an increasingly frequent topic as I approached my senior year of high school. My mother had been cultivating a relationship with the Wilsons, a family that had recently moved to our community. Their son, Marcus, was 33 to my 18, recently divorced, and the heir to his father's real estate development company. He had the right pedigree, the right connections, and, according to my mother, was the perfect match for me. "He's established, successful, and from a good family," she would gush after their visits. "You should be flattered he's shown interest in you." What my mother interpreted as interest, I recognized as something far more unsettling. The way Marcus looked at me during dinner parties made my skin crawl. His eyes would linger too long. His comments about how I was blossoming into a beautiful young woman delivered with a smile that never reached his eyes. When he would accidentally brush against me or place his hand on the small of my back, I would feel sick to my stomach. Meanwhile, I had secret dreams of my own. I wanted to study business and marketing. Late at night, I would research colleges with strong business programs. Schools far away from Pennsylvania. I kept brochures hidden beneath my mattress like contraband. When college application season arrived, I applied to 7 schools without my parents' knowledge, using money I had saved from babysitting to pay the application fees. My acceptance letter from the University of California, Berkeley, arrived on a Tuesday. I hid it in my desk drawer, simultaneously elated and terrified. That same evening, my mother announced that the Wilsons would be joining us for dinner that weekend for a very special occasion. The knowing look she gave my father sent a chill down my spine. "We have such wonderful news," she told me, patting my hand in a rare display of affection. "You'll finally understand why I've been so hard on you all these years. Everything I've done has been to prepare you for this moment." As the week progressed, my mother was unusually pleasant, helping me select an outfit for the dinner and even scheduling an appointment at her hair salon for me. Her sudden kindness only increased my anxiety. The acceptance letter burned in my desk drawer like a live coal, representing everything I wanted versus everything that was being planned for me without my consent. The night before the dinner, I overheard my parents talking in hushed tones in their bedroom. "She's too young," my father said, showing a rare moment of backbone. "Nonsense," my mother replied. "I was 19 when we married. Besides, the Wilsons are offering a very generous arrangement. This connection will secure her future and help with your partnership track at the firm. Everyone wins." I backed away from their door, my heart pounding. They weren't just planning a marriage. They were negotiating a business transaction, and I was the commodity being sold. The dining room gleamed under the chandelier light that Saturday evening. Crystal glasses, our finest china, and polished silver adorned the table my mother had spent all day preparing. I sat rigidly in my navy blue dress, my hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. The Wilsons arrived precisely at 7, Marcus trailing behind his parents with a smug confidence that made my stomach turn. He was objectively handsome, tall with dark hair and the kind of features that photographed well for business magazines, but his practiced smile never reached his cold blue eyes. He carried a small velvet box that he placed beside his water glass, catching my eye with a wink that made me shudder internally. "Samantha," he greeted me, kissing my cheek and lingering too long. "You look absolutely stunning tonight." The dinner progressed with excruciating slowness. Business talk dominated the conversation, with occasional references to the future and joining our families that made the food taste like ash in my mouth. My mother beamed throughout the meal, while my father occasionally glanced at me with what almost looked like regret. After dessert was served, Mr. Wilson clinked his glass. "I believe we should get to the real purpose of this evening." My mother nodded enthusiastically, while Marcus stood and moved to my side of the table. The room seemed to tilt as he dropped to one knee beside my chair. "Samantha Turner," he announced, opening the velvet box to reveal a diamond ring that looked oppressively large. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The silence that followed felt endless. Everyone stared at me expectantly. My mother with barely contained excitement, my father with resignation, the Wilsons with confident smiles. Marcus's expression was not of love or even affection, but of someone closing a successful business deal. I need some air," I managed to say, rising from my chair. "Excuse me for a moment." I fled to the back porch, gulping the cool evening air. Footsteps followed me, and I turned to find Marcus standing there, his expression now irritated. "That wasn't the response I was expecting," he said, crossing his arms. "I'm sorry, but this is all very sudden," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We barely know each other." He laughed, a sound without warmth. "Don't be naive, Samantha. This arrangement has been in the works for months. Your mother assured me you were on board." "Arrangement." The word hung between us like a slap. "Yes, arrangement. My father is helping yours make partner. Your mother gets the social standing she's always wanted, and I get a young, beautiful wife who can give me children and host company events." He reached out to touch my face. "You'll have a comfortable life. Many women would be grateful for such an opportunity." I stepped back from his touch. "And what if I want a career, an education, a say in my own future?" His expression hardened. "My wife won't need to work. As for education, a few cooking classes might be beneficial, but otherwise unnecessary. And your future," he gestured to the ring box. "I am your future." I stared at him, finally seeing with complete clarity what my life would become if I accepted. A decorative possession, carefully managed and controlled, my dreams discarded in favor of his requirements. "No," I said, the word feeling like freedom on my lips. "I won't marry you." Marcus's face flushed with anger. "You will regret this," he hissed before storming back inside. I gave myself a moment to breathe before following. When I re-entered the dining room, the atmosphere had transformed. The Wilsons were gathering their coats, Mrs. Wilson whispering furiously to my mother while Mr. Wilson glared in my direction. My father stood awkwardly by the doorway, looking anywhere but at me. Once the front door closed behind our guests, my mother rounded on me. "What have you done?" she demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've just thrown away?" "I've saved myself from a lifetime of misery," I answered, a strange calm settling over me. "I won't marry a man who sees me as property." "Property?" she scoffed. "You ungrateful child. Marcus Wilson is one of the most eligible bachelors in the state. He would have given you security, status, everything I've worked to prepare you for. I don't want those things if they come at the cost of my freedom." My mother's face contorted with fury. "This is about those college applications, isn't it? Did you think I wouldn't find them? That I wouldn't see the letter from Berkeley?" My heart sank. She had been through my things. "I want to study business," I said, straightening my spine. "I want to build my own life." "You're a disgrace," she shouted, her perfect composure finally shattering. "After everything we've done for you, the Wilsons will never speak to us again. Your father's career is ruined because of your selfishness." I looked to my father, hoping for support, but he just stared at the floor. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said quietly, "but I won't change my mind." The slap came without warning, her palm connecting with my cheek with enough force to snap my head to the side. The sting spread across my skin as tears sprang to my eyes from the shock and pain. "Get out," she whispered, her voice deadly quiet. "If you're too good for the life we've planned for you, then you can leave and see how well you do on your own." "Margaret," my father finally spoke, his voice weak. "She's just a teenager." "No," my mother cut him off. "She's made her choice. Now she can live with it." I stood frozen, my hand pressed to my burning cheek. "You don't mean that." "Pack your things and get out of my house," she replied, turning her back to me. "You're no daughter of mine." I climbed the stairs in a daze, grabbed my school backpack and filled it with essentials. Some clothes, my toothbrush, the college acceptance letter, and the small amount of cash I had saved. When I returned downstairs, my mother was nowhere to be seen. My father stood by the front door, his face ashen. "Dad," I pleaded, "please don't let her do this." He reached into his wallet and pressed $300 into my hand. "This is all I can do," he whispered. "I'm sorry, Samantha." Then he opened the door to the rainy night outside. I stepped past him, the door closing firmly behind me. I stood on the porch of the only home I'd ever known, rain soaking through my dress, my face still stinging from my mother's slap, and realized I was truly alone. The rain soaked through my clothes as I walked away from my childhood home, each step taking me further from everything familiar and deeper into an uncertain future. My cell phone buzzed in my pocket. My mother had not thought to take that away. With trembling fingers, I called the only person I could think of. "Audrey, it's Sam. Hey, I need help." Audrey Jackson had been my best friend since 5th grade. Unlike my other friends whose parents moved in the same social circles as mine, Audrey came from a working-class family. My mother had always referred to her as my charity project, a comment that made me furious. Within 30 minutes, Audrey's beat-up Honda pulled alongside the curb where I waited, sheltering under a bus stop. "What happened?" she asked as I climbed into the passenger seat, my backpack and drenched clothes dripping onto her floor mats. Through tears, I explained everything: the arranged marriage, my refusal, my mother's reaction. Audrey's parents welcomed me with open arms, setting up a makeshift bed on their living room couch. "Stay as long as you need," Mrs. Jackson told me, her kind eyes so different from my mother's cold stare. 2 weeks stretched into a month. I enrolled in community college using my acceptance letter from Berkeley as proof of my high school completion. Berkeley itself would have to wait. The tuition was impossible without my parents' support. I found work at a local coffee shop, then added weekend shifts at a grocery store, and took on evening babysitting for a neighbor. My life became an exhausting cycle of work, classes, and brief periods of sleep. My first apartment was a studio the size of my old bedroom, with peeling wallpaper and cockroaches that scattered when I turned on the lights. The mattress on the floor, the single plate and fork, the shower that only ran cold. These were my new reality. Each night I would collapse into bed, my body aching from standing all day, my mind racing with assignment deadlines and bill due dates. The scholarship rejection letter came on a Tuesday, 3 months after I'd moved out. I had pinned so much hope on that possibility, a full ride that would let me transfer to a 4-year university. The thin envelope contained a single sheet. We regret to inform you that due to the high volume of qualified applicants. That night was the closest I came to breaking. Sitting on my mattress, staring at my prepaid phone, I contemplated calling home. Maybe if I apologized, agreed to their terms, I could escape this grinding poverty. My finger hovered over the number I still knew by heart. Instead, I called Audrey, who talked me down from my moment of weakness. "You've come too far to go back now," she reminded me. "Remember why you left." The next morning, my hands shaking from exhaustion as I prepared lattes at the coffee shop, I spilled a customer's order. As I apologized profusely and remade the drink, the woman watched me with curious eyes. "Rough night?" she asked when I handed her the replacement. "Rough few months," I admitted with a tired smile. Her name was Elaine Carson, and she was the marketing director for a mid-sized local company. Something about our brief interaction must have impressed her, because she returned the next day, and the day after that. On her third visit, she handed me her business card. "We have a junior position open," she said. "No experience required, but it demands someone smart who can think on their feet. The hours are better than this place, and it includes benefits. Interested?" That moment changed everything. The position was entry-level, mainly answering phones and organizing files, but it came with regular hours and health insurance. More importantly, it gave me a foot in the door of the industry I dreamed of entering. I continued taking night classes, now focusing exclusively on business and marketing. Elaine became more than a boss. She became the mentor I desperately needed. She noticed my interest in the campaigns they developed, my questions about strategy and client needs. 6 months into the job, when I presented her with ideas for improving their social media approach, she actually implemented them. "You have good instincts," she told me after the campaign showed positive results. "Keep developing them." My first promotion came after I stayed late for weeks straight to help rescue a project for a major client. The small raise meant I could quit the grocery store job and focus more on my studies. The second promotion, 18 months later, allowed me to move to a slightly better apartment, one without roaches and with reliable hot water. There were still moments of crushing doubt, when a pipe burst in my apartment, ruining my textbooks, when I got sick but couldn't afford to miss work, when I would see photos on social media of my high school friends graduating from prestigious universities while I was still piecing together my education, one community college class at a time. But with each challenge I overcame, my confidence grew. The scared 18-year-old who had stood in the rain that night was transforming into someone stronger, someone who solved her own problems and charted her own course. The memory of my mother's slap and my father's silence still hurt, but it no longer had the power to break me. 3 years after being thrown out, I completed my associate's degree. Elaine took me to dinner to celebrate, ordering champagne despite my protests that I couldn't afford to split such an expensive bill. "My treat," she insisted. "Besides, I have an ulterior motive." She proceeded to outline a new position she had created specifically for me, a role that would give me more responsibility and creative input in their campaigns. The salary she mentioned made me choke on my champagne. "You've earned this," she said, sliding the official offer letter across the table. "And I have a feeling this is just the beginning for you, Samantha Turner." That night, looking at the offer letter on my small kitchen table, I allowed myself to really believe, for the first time, that I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something. The path forward still held challenges, but for the first time since that rainy night, the future looked bright with possibility rather than daunting with obstacles. And I had done it all without crawling back to beg forgiveness for the crime of wanting to control my own destiny. 4 years and countless late nights after being kicked out, I stood in an auditorium, wearing a cap and gown, waiting to receive my bachelor's degree in business administration. I had completed my 4-year degree while working full-time, transferring my community college credits and taking night and weekend classes. The path had been longer than traditional students, but I had done it, debt-free and with real-world experience already on my resume. In the audience, Elaine cheered loudly as I crossed the stage. My parents' seats remained empty. I hadn't invited them. Some wounds were still too raw, too deep to bridge. 2 weeks after graduation, Elaine called me into her office and closed the door, her expression unreadable. "I've been watching you develop for years now," she began, "and I've come to a difficult conclusion." My stomach dropped, assuming the worst. "You've outgrown us," she continued. "Your ideas are bigger than what we can implement here. You need to start your own company." I laughed, thinking she was joking. "With what capital?" "My massive savings from my entry-level marketing salary." She slid a check across the desk, her personal check for $50,000. "Consider this seed money," she said when I tried to refuse. "Not a gift, but an investment. I want 15% equity in whatever you build." With shaking hands, I accepted both the check and the challenge. I rented a tiny office space, barely more than a closet, and registered Turner Marketing Consultants as an official business. My focus would be helping small businesses develop digital marketing strategies, an area traditional agencies often neglected due to smaller budgets. The first 6 months were terrifying. I took on any client I could find, working 18-hour days, handling everything from strategy to implementation to bookkeeping. 2 clients canceled their contracts, nearly sinking me before I'd properly begun. I learned painful lessons about contracts, cash flow, and setting proper expectations. The turning point came when I developed a social media campaign for a struggling local bakery that increased their foot traffic by 300% in 1 month. The owner, thrilled with the results, referred me to other small business owners. Word spread, and suddenly I had more potential clients than I could handle alone. I hired my first employee, a recent graduate named Lisa who reminded me of myself a few years earlier. Then a second, third. By the end of my 2nd year in business, Turner Marketing occupied a real office with 8 employees, and I had repaid Elaine's initial investment while she retained her equity stake. It was during a pitch meeting for what would be our largest client yet that I met Michael Reynolds. He owned a chain of sustainable home goods stores and was looking to expand nationally. Unlike most potential clients who focus solely on metrics and ROI during initial meetings, Michael asked thoughtful questions about my business philosophy and long-term vision. "I like how you think," he said at the end of my presentation. "You understand that marketing isn't just about selling products. It's about building relationships with customers who share your values." We won the contract, and over the next few months, I worked closely with Michael to develop his brand's expansion strategy. Our professional relationship gradually evolved as we discovered shared interests beyond business, a love of obscure documentaries, hiking trails, and passionate debates about everything from environmental policy to the best way to make pizza dough from scratch. On our 3rd dinner meeting that had nothing to do with business, Michael asked if he could kiss me. The fact that he asked permission rather than assuming, that small gesture of respect for my boundaries, told me everything I needed to know about his character. Our relationship progressed with the same thoughtfulness. Michael celebrated my ambition rather than feeling threatened by it. When my company secured its first $1 million client, he surprised me with champagne and took me skydiving, something I'd mentioned wanting to try someday when I had time. "Life's too short to keep putting off the things that scare and excite you," he said as we plummeted through the air, his hand gripping mine. 2 years into our relationship, I discovered I was pregnant. The timing wasn't planned. My company was in the middle of opening a 2nd office in Chicago, and Michael was negotiating to take his business national. The pregnancy test in my hand represented another unplanned detour in my carefully constructed life. "What are you thinking?" Michael asked when I showed him the test, his voice gentle. "I'm thinking about my mother," I admitted. How she had such specific plans for me and how angry she was when I chose a different path. "I don't want to be that kind of parent." He wrapped his arms around me. "We'll figure this out together. Whatever you decide, I'm with you." His unconditional support made the decision clear. 9 months later, our daughter Emma came into the world. 5 pounds, 6 ounces of determination, with her father's green eyes and what the nurses called a very opinionated cry. Holding her, I made a silent promise that she would always know her voice mattered. Her choices were her own, and that love didn't come with conditions. Balancing motherhood with running a growing company presented challenges I hadn't anticipated. I brought Emma to the office in the early months, converting a storage room into a nursery. My employees, now numbering 25 across 2 offices, adjusted to strategy meetings occasionally interrupted by a baby's cries. Michael took on more flexible hours with his business to share parenting responsibilities equally. When Emma was 2, Michael proposed during a normal Tuesday evening at home after we'd put her to bed and were washing dishes side by side. "I don't need a big wedding or a diamond ring," he said, presenting a simple band. "I just want us to be a family, officially." We married in a small ceremony with only our closest friends. Elaine was my matron of honor. Audrey flew in from Seattle, where she now worked as a nurse. Emma toddled down the aisle dropping flower petals, occasionally stopping to eat them. Standing beside Michael as we exchanged vows, I reflected on how different this marriage was from the one my mother had tried to force upon me. This union was built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love, everything the arrangement with Marcus had lacked. By Emma's 5th birthday, Turner Marketing had grown to 3 offices nationwide with over 70 employees. We'd been featured in Business Insider as one of the fastest-growing women-led companies in the country. The purchase of the company jet, a small used Cessna Citation, was a business decision that made practical sense given how often I traveled between offices. But it also represented a milestone I could never have imagined when I stood in the rain with only a backpack of belongings. Through all this growth and change, I had maintained my vow of no contact with my parents. I occasionally heard updates through mutual acquaintances. My father had made partner at his firm. My mother was still active in the same social circles. I wondered sometimes if they ever regretted their ultimatum, if they ever thought about the daughter they had cast out for wanting to choose her own path. I had almost convinced myself that chapter of my life was permanently closed when a distant cousin reached out via email to let me know my father had undergone emergency heart surgery. The message was brief, with no request for a response or visit, just information passed along because she thought I should know. That night, after tucking Emma into bed, I sat on our patio looking at the stars. "What's on your mind?" Michael asked, joining me with 2 glasses of wine. "My father could have died," I said quietly, "and I wouldn't have known until after the fact. Does that bother you?" I considered the question carefully. Yes, not because I'm ready to forgive them, but because there's an Emma-sized hole in their lives they don't even know about. And maybe an unresolved wound in mine I've been ignoring. The next morning I made 2 decisions. First, Turner Marketing would open its next office in my hometown, creating jobs and establishing my professional presence there. Second, after 11 years of silence, it was time to face my parents. Not for their sake, but for my own peace of mind and for Emma, who deserved the chance to know her grandparents if they could prove themselves worthy of her. "Mommy, why don't I have grandparents like Zoe?" Emma asked one evening as I tucked her into bed. At 5 years old, her questions had become increasingly difficult to deflect with simple answers. Her best friend Zoe often talked about weekends spent with doting grandparents who spoiled her with ice cream and trips to the zoo. I sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her dark curls away from her forehead. "You have Grandma Elaine," I reminded her, referring to my mentor who had become a surrogate grandmother figure. Emma scrunched her nose. "But Zoe has 4 grandparents. Where are your mommy and daddy?" The innocent question landed like a punch to the gut. For years, I had successfully compartmentalized the pain of my estrangement from my parents, focusing instead on building my business and my new family. But through Emma's eyes, the absence took on a new dimension. "They live far away," I said finally. The partial truth, easier than explaining the full complexity of adult relationships to a 5-year-old. "Can we visit them sometime?" Her wide green eyes, so like Michael's, looked up at me with simple curiosity. "Maybe someday, sweetheart. Time for sleep now." As I closed her bedroom door, Michael was waiting in the hallway, having overheard the conversation. "You knew this day would come," he said gently as we walked to the living room. "I thought I'd have better answers prepared." I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. How do I explain to her that her grandparents threw me out because I wouldn't marry a man they chose? That they've never even tried to contact me in all these years? Michael sat beside me, taking my hand. "Maybe you don't have to explain it yet. But maybe it's time to consider whether this complete separation is still what you want." I had been so certain of my decision to keep my parents out of my life. The hurt they had caused ran deep, the betrayal fundamental. But Emma's question had cracked open a door I'd kept firmly shut. The next morning, I received an email from a distant cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "I'm not sure if you keep up with family news," she wrote, "but I thought you should know your father had emergency bypass surgery last week. He's recovering, but it was serious. Just thought you'd want to know." I stared at the screen, a complex mixture of emotions washing over me. The father who had stood silently by while my mother threw me out had nearly died, and I wouldn't have known if not for this casual email. Despite everything, the news affected me more deeply than I expected. Later that week, during a strategic planning meeting for Turner Marketing's expansion, our head of operations presented several potential locations for our next office. "The analytics suggest either Denver or returning to your roots in Pennsylvania," she concluded. "The Pennsylvania location actually shows slightly better numbers due to lower operating costs and an untapped market for our services." The synchronicity felt too significant to ignore. Our business was ready to expand. Emma was asking about her grandparents. And now, news of my father's health crisis, all pointing toward a return to the place I had fled 11 years ago. That evening, I researched my parents online, something I had deliberately avoided doing for years. My father's accounting firm had a professional photo of him on their website. He looked older, grayer, with deep lines around his eyes I didn't remember. My mother appeared in local news coverage of charity events, still impeccably dressed, still the picture of social propriety. Their house, my childhood home, was the same, at least from the Google Street View image I found. More surprising was what I discovered about Marcus Wilson, the man I was supposed to marry. A local news article from 5 years ago detailed his arrest for domestic violence against his wife. The charges were later reduced in a plea deal, but the incident had apparently cost him his position at his father's company. I felt a chill reading the article, thinking of how close I had come to that fate. "I've made a decision," I told Michael that night. "We're going to open the Pennsylvania office, and I'm going to oversee the launch personally. I think it's time Emma met her grandparents." Michael studied my face. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" "No," I admitted. "But I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for Emma, and maybe a little bit for the 18-year-old girl who deserved better than what she got." Over the next month, we prepared for the trip. I deliberately didn't announce our arrival to my parents. I wanted the element of surprise, needed to see their genuine reaction when I appeared on their doorstep after 11 years. Perhaps it was petty, but I also wanted them to see what I had accomplished without their support or approval. I found myself obsessively checking details: the itinerary, Emma's outfits, the hotel reservations, the meetings scheduled with local business contacts. Michael gently pointed out that my perfectionism was reaching new heights. "You know you don't have to impress them, right?" he said as he watched me try on the 5th business suit for our arrival. "You've built an amazing life. If they can't see that, it's their loss." The night before our departure, I tucked Emma into bed and tried to prepare her for the meeting. "Remember those grandparents you asked about? We're going to visit them tomorrow." Her eyes widened with excitement. "Really? Will they have cookies like Grandma Lane?" I smiled at her simple expectations. "I don't know, sweetheart. I haven't seen them in a very long time." "Why not?" Her directness, as always, cut straight to the heart of the matter. "Sometimes grown-ups disagree about important things, and they need time apart to figure things out." She considered this with the seriousness only a 5-year-old can muster. "Are you scared to see them?" Her perception startled me. "A little bit," I admitted. She nodded sagely. "That's okay, Mommy. I'll hold your hand when I'm scared." The next morning we boarded the company jet, a small Cessna Citation that served as both a practical business tool and the most visible symbol of how far I'd come. Emma was beside herself with excitement about flying on our very own airplane, while I tried to quiet the nervous flutter in my stomach. As we approached the small regional airport nearest my hometown, I gazed out the window at the familiar landscape, the rolling hills, the patchwork of farms and suburbs, the river winding through it all. It looked exactly the same, yet I was returning a completely different person than the one who had left. "We're beginning our descent," the pilot announced over the intercom. "Welcome to Pennsylvania, Miss Turner." I took a deep breath and squeezed Emma's small hand in mine. "Here we go," I whispered, as much to myself as to her. The rental car company had a sleek black Audi waiting for us at the small regional airport, a far cry from the bus I had taken the last time I left this town. Emma bounced excitedly in her car seat as we drove through familiar streets that felt both unchanged and strangely smaller than I remembered. Michael sat beside me, occasionally squeezing my hand when he sensed my tension rising. "Are you sure you don't want me to come with you to meet them first?" he asked as we checked into our hotel. I shook my head. "This is something I need to do myself. Besides, Emma will be buffer enough." After settling into our suite and changing Emma into a pretty blue dress that matched her eyes, I stood before the mirror, adjusting my own appearance. The woman who stared back bore little resemblance to the terrified teenager who had fled this town 11 years ago. My hair was styled in a confident bob. My tailored blazer and dress screamed success, and the slight lines around my eyes spoke of both laughter and determination. "Ready, sweetheart?" I asked Emma, who was already by the door, impatient to meet these mysterious grandparents. The drive to my childhood home took exactly 12 minutes, a journey that spanned a lifetime in my mind. As we pulled up to the familiar 2-story colonial, I noticed signs of neglect that hadn't been visible in the online photos. The once pristine lawn was patchy, the white trim needed painting, and the flower beds my mother had obsessively maintained looked sparse and overgrown. "Is this where you grew up, Mommy?" Emma asked, pressing her face against the car window. "Yes, from the time I was born until I was 18. "It's pretty," she declared with the easy acceptance of childhood. We sat in the car for several minutes while I gathered my courage. Finally, taking a deep breath, I helped Emma out and walked up the familiar path to the front door. The doorbell chime was the same one I remembered, a pretentious Westminster melody my mother had specially installed to impress visitors. The door opened to reveal my father, noticeably thinner than in his website photo, wearing a cardigan despite the warm weather. His eyes widened in shock, his mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. "Samantha," he whispered as though seeing a ghost. "Hello, Dad," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. His gaze dropped to Emma, who was partially hiding behind my legs while peering curiously at the stranger. "Who's at the door, Robert?" my mother's voice called from inside, followed by her appearance in the hallway. She froze mid-step when she saw me, her hand flying to her throat. "I thought it was time for a visit," I said into the silence, "and for you to meet your granddaughter." At the word granddaughter, my mother's knees seemed to buckle slightly. My father reached out to steady her, an automatic gesture that spoke of long habit. "This is Emma," I continued, gently urging my daughter forward. "Emma, these are your grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. Turner." Emma, suddenly shy, pressed closer to me but offered a small wave. Would you like to come in?" my father finally managed, stepping back from the doorway. The interior of the house was like stepping into a time capsule. The same formal furniture, the same floral arrangements, the same family photos on the wall, though I noticed my graduation portrait was conspicuously absent. Only the layer of dust on some surfaces and the slightly worn upholstery suggested the passage of time. "Can I get you something to drink?" my mother asked automatically, her social hostess training kicking in despite her obvious shock. Apple juice for Emma would be nice. Water is fine for me. As my mother disappeared into the kitchen, my father gestured awkwardly toward the living room. Emma immediately gravitated toward a crystal figurine on the coffee table. "Please don't touch that, sweetheart," I said. "It's very fragile." "Actually," my father said, surprising me, "it's okay." He carefully took down the crystal unicorn and handed it to Emma. "This was your mother's favorite when she was little too." My mother returned with drinks, her hands visibly shaking as she sat them down. An awkward silence descended as we all sat, the weight of 11 years of absence hanging heavy in the air. "Your hair is different," my mother finally said, an inane observation that almost made me laugh. "A lot of things are different, Mom. We saw you in Business Insider," my father blurted out. "The article about fastest growing companies led by women. We have a subscription." This revelation caught me off guard. "You saw that?" "We've seen all of them," my mother said quietly. "The feature in Marketing Monthly, the interview on Channel 9 when you opened your Chicago office, the charity gala where you received the Young Entrepreneur Award." My confusion must have shown on my face, because my father stood suddenly. "Wait here," he said, disappearing upstairs. While he was gone, Emma, bored with adult conversation, asked my mother, "Do you have any toys?" A flash of pain crossed my mother's face. "No, I'm afraid we don't. We weren't expecting, we didn't know." My father returned carrying a large scrapbook, which he placed on the coffee table between us. I opened it to find newspaper clippings, printed web articles, and photographs, a comprehensive collection of every public mention of me or my company over the past decade. "Your room is exactly as you left it," my father said as I silently turned the pages. "Margaret wouldn't let anyone touch it." I looked up sharply. "My room. Would you like to see it?" my mother asked, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. Leaving Emma happily exploring the crystal figurine collection under my father's watchful eye, I followed my mother upstairs. The door to my bedroom still had the same "keep out" sign I had taped there at 15. When she opened it, I gasped softly. It was indeed exactly as I had left it, the blue comforter still rumpled from my last morning there, books stacked on the desk, even a half-finished glass of water on the nightstand. It was as though my mother had preserved it like a museum exhibit, a monument to the daughter who had vanished. "Why?" I asked, turning to her. She smoothed her hands over her skirt, a nervous gesture I'd never seen from her before. "At first, I was so angry I couldn't bear to come in here. Then, when the anger faded, it became a reminder of my greatest failure." The admission hung between us, neither of us quite ready to unpack its full meaning. Back downstairs, Emma had charmed my father into showing her photo albums, specifically pictures of me as a child. "You were little like me," she giggled, pointing at a photo of 5-year-old me covered in mud after a rainstorm. "Your mother was always headstrong," my father told her with unexpected warmth. She knew her own mind even then. As Emma continued to flip through the album, I took the opportunity to ask the questions that had been burning inside me for 11 years. "Why did you never try to contact me?" "Not once in all this time." My parents exchanged glances. "We didn't think you would want to hear from us," my father admitted. "After what happened, Margaret was." He hesitated, looking at my mother. "She was not in a good place for a long time after you left." My mother's perfect posture sagged slightly. "I was wrong," she said, the words clearly difficult for her. "About Marcus. About everything." "What do you mean?" "Did you know he was arrested?" my father asked. "For hitting his wife?" He nodded. "I saw the news article. When we heard about that, it was like a physical blow," my mother said. "Realizing what we had tried to push you into. What could have happened to you? By then, you were already building your company," my father continued. "You seemed to be doing so well without us. We thought reaching out might just reopen old wounds." The conversation was interrupted by Emma's stomach growling audibly. "I'm hungry, Mommy," she announced. "We could order something," my father suggested eagerly. Or there's that Italian place downtown you used to like. Check my watch. Actually, we should get back to the hotel. Michael will be wondering where we are. Michael? My mother asked. Emma's father. My husband. Their expressions registered another shock. They hadn't known I was married. Perhaps you could all come for dinner tomorrow, my mother suggested hesitantly. We'd like to meet him. I considered the invitation, studying both their faces. My mother looked older than her years, the perfect facade of my childhood cracked to reveal the insecure woman beneath. My father seemed diminished somehow, his confident accountant's demeanor replaced by a tentative hopefulness. We'll see, I said, not yet ready to commit. There's something else I need to know first. Are you having financial problems? They both stiffened. Why would you ask that? My mother responded defensively. The house needs maintenance. Dad looks like he's lost weight. And I know healthcare isn't cheap, especially after heart surgery. My father sighed deeply. The firm downsized 3 years ago. I wasn't let go, but my partnership track evaporated. And yes, the medical bills have been challenging. We're managing, my mother added quickly, pride still evident in her voice. As I gathered Emma's things and prepared to leave, I made a decision. I'm opening a branch office here, I told them. We'll be hiring local staff. Dad, you're good with numbers and client relations. If you're interested, I could use someone with your experience. The offer hung in the air. Not charity, but an opportunity. First step towards something new. That evening at our hotel, I recounted the visit to Michael over dinner while Emma colored nearby. They kept a scrapbook of everything I've done, I said, still processing the revelation. All these years, I thought they'd washed their hands of me. People are complicated, Michael replied. They can be wrong, even terribly wrong, and still love their child. I don't know if I can forgive them yet, I admitted. Especially my mother. Forgiveness doesn't have to happen all at once, he said wisely. It can be a process. The question is whether you want to start that process. I looked over at Emma, happily absorbed in her coloring book, unaware of the complex adult emotions swirling around her existence. I think for her sake. I do. The following evening, we returned to my parents' house for dinner. Michael, Emma, and me. My mother had clearly spent the day cooking, the dining room table laden with all my childhood favorites. My father nervously shook Michael's hand, his eyes registering approval of my husband's firm grip and direct gaze. We've prepared the good china, my mother announced, her voice betraying her anxiety. Actually, I interjected, let's use the everyday dishes. With a 5-year-old, it's safer. The small rebellion, changing my mother's careful plans, hung in the air momentarily before she nodded. Of course. You're right. That simple acquiescence, so unlike the controlling mother of my youth, spoke volumes about how our dynamics had shifted. I was no longer the powerless teenager. I was an adult, making reasonable requests that she now had to consider. Dinner conversation remained carefully polite, skating around the deeper issues still unresolved between us. Emma, oblivious to the undercurrents, charmed her grandparents with stories about her kindergarten adventures and her favorite stuffed animals waiting back home. She's remarkable, my father said, watching Emma demonstrate how she could count to 100. You've done a wonderful job with her. We have, I corrected gently, taking Michael's hand. We're equal partners in parenting, just like we are in everything else. My mother's eyes flickered between Michael and me, observing our easy rapport with something like wistfulness. After Emma had been tucked into bed in the guest room upstairs, the 4 adults gathered in the living room for the conversation we couldn't have in front of her. I'd like to establish some ground rules, I began, my business negotiation skills serving me well in this personal arena. If we're going to have any relationship moving forward, I need certain boundaries respected. My parents nodded, my father leaning forward attentively while my mother clasped her hands tightly in her lap. First, Emma is being raised to make her own choices. You will never pressure her about who she should be or what she should do with her life. Of course, my father agreed immediately. Second, Michael and I make decisions about our family as equals. Our marriage is a partnership, not a hierarchy. My mother's lips thinned slightly, but she nodded. Third, I'm offering Dad a position at the new office because he's qualified and we need someone with his skills. It's not charity, and it comes with the same expectations I have for all my employees. I understand, my father said, sitting straighter. And I appreciate the opportunity. I won't disappoint you. The formality of our interaction gradually softened as Michael shared stories about our life together, carefully highlighting my accomplishments without rubbing my parents' faces in what they had missed. By the end of the evening, we had agreed to regular video calls with Emma and monthly dinners when I was in town overseeing the new office. As we prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside. "Samantha," he began, his voice breaking slightly, "I need to say this. Failed you. When your mother. When we threw you out, I should have stood up for you. I was a coward, and I've regretted it every day since." The apology I had waited 11 years to hear washed over me, releasing something tight and painful I had carried for too long. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, my own voice unsteady. My mother's apology came later and with more difficulty. 3 months after our initial reunion, during a tense dinner where she had made several passive-aggressive comments about Emma's undisciplined behavior. I finally confronted her directly. "Mom, if this relationship is going to work, you need to acknowledge what happened and take responsibility for your part in it." She stiffened, the old defenses rising. "I've already said I was wrong about Marcus." "That's not enough," I pressed. "You threw your 18-year-old daughter out into the night with nowhere to go because she wouldn't follow your life plan. You need to understand how deeply that hurt me, and how it might never fully heal." The silence stretched between us until Michael gently took Emma outside to look at the stars, giving us privacy. When my mother finally spoke, her voice was different, stripped of its usual polish and pretense. "I was terrified," she admitted. "I thought I was protecting you from making mistakes, from having the hard life I had before I married your father. I thought I knew best." She looked up, tears in her eyes. "I was so wrong, Samantha. And I'm so sorry for the pain I caused you." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was genuine, perhaps the first completely honest conversation we had ever had. The months that followed brought gradual changes. My father thrived in his position at Turner Marketing, his financial expertise and client relationship skills making him a valuable team member. My mother volunteered to help with Emma when we were in town, slowly learning to respect the parenting boundaries Michael and I established. I suggested they consider family therapy, and, surprisingly, they agreed. The sessions revealed generational patterns I hadn't known about: my mother's own strict upbringing, my father's childhood with an alcoholic parent. Understanding the roots of their behavior didn't excuse it, but helped explain the damaged people behind the polished facade they had presented to the world. 1 year after our reunion, we gathered for Emma's 6th birthday, not at my parents' house, but at a local park where Emma could play freely without worrying about breaking precious objects. Watching my daughter show my father how to properly swing across the monkey bars, his suit pants getting dusty as he awkwardly followed her instructions, I felt a bittersweet contentment. "Penny for your thoughts," Michael said, joining me on the bench. "I was just thinking about the difference between the family I grew up in and the one we've created," I replied. "How cycles can be broken." Later, as we cut the birthday cake, my mother snapped a photo of the 4 of us: Michael, Emma, me, and my father. "Let me take another," she insisted. "Samantha, you weren't smiling properly." I felt the old tension rise at her criticism, but then she surprised me by adding, "Or don't smile if you don't want to. It's your choice. The photo will be beautiful either way." It was a small moment, but it represented a massive shift in our relationship. Her recognition of my autonomy, even in something as minor as how I posed for a photograph. That night, after Emma was asleep in the hotel room, I scrolled through the day's photos, pausing on one that captured all 5 of us together. It wasn't a perfect family portrait. Emma was mid-laugh, my father was looking at her instead of the camera, my mother's smile seemed uncertain, and Michael and I had been caught exchanging a private glance. Yet in its imperfection, it was honest in a way the carefully posed portraits of my childhood never had been. My journey from that rainy night 11 years ago to this moment had been filled with struggles and triumphs neither my 18-year-old self nor my controlling mother could have imagined. The wounds of the past hadn't completely healed, perhaps they never would, but they had transformed into something different: wisdom, strength, and the determination to create a better pattern for my own daughter. The true success story wasn't the private jet or the thriving business. It was the freedom I had fought for, the right to chart my own course, make my own mistakes, and build a life based on mutual respect rather than control. It was the knowledge that Emma would grow up understanding her voice mattered and her choices were her own. And that was worth every hardship I had endured along the way. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have tried to reconnect with family that hurt you, or kept that chapter of your life firmly closed? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and self-discovery. And if you know someone who might need to hear that standing up for themselves is worth it, share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your life is yours to define, no one else's.